Okay, so now let's get into Pinecone. This is going to be our vector database, which is going to support the retrieval augmented generation pattern, which is important when interacting with the large language model to avoid hallucinations or other inaccurate data. And I'll talk a little bit about why we introduced that system and not try to rely on something like Content Stack or other workarounds. But first, let's just see what it looks like. So to get that content into Pinecone, there is some Python that was used, and most of this demo was built without code. But there are some technical things that have to be done depending on what tools you have and what the solutions are. So just to speed things up for the demo, I hard coded in this content, and this is what the Python is doing to insert those vectors into the index. Now, typically, how you would think about this in your production scenario is having some type of job to inspect the content stack content that was published and make these updates to the index automatically as another destination that needs to get content. Once it's there, it's quite powerful. So let's take a look at the index for the renewal demo. So this is Pinecone, and there's a little browser here that lets me see my index. And I can test a search here, and you can see the power of semantic search and the content that I modeled in Content Stack. So I'm going to put something like playbook for at-risk renewals and benefits. So, it's not keying off a specific field here, and there can be variations to this, and that's what this architecture is designed for. And you'll see that it ranks the renewal playbook content first, and it also brings back some values here from the benefit items. And these are related to the Plus membership. So you can imagine when you're feeding this to AI and maybe asking it to explain to a customer why they would want to renew, it can think about their pain points that you may have captured in other pieces of data in the CRM, for instance, or other industry things that are happening, and combine that with the value prop here set by marketing to then produce an on-target message that makes a lot of sense. And this is the power of the workflow and AI together at scale, because before, when we tried to do this without AI, we were overwhelmed with all the variations of content and all the rules and all the different personas we may meet, and it just didn't scale. So you saw many personalization projects stall after maybe the first phase or two, and didn't really go beyond that, being able to provide real, true, like one-to-one messaging. Okay, so that's the setup for the data essentially. So what we'll do in the next video is go through Zapier and just execute the workflow and look at the data inputs and outputs and how the prompt is structured and what it's doing. But before we wrap here on this one, we just hammer home the retrieval augmented generation pattern, RAG, that you've been seeing a lot of, why this is the better architecture. So several points. First, future proofing. You can't scale the deterministic fields forever. You're going to add more benefits, policies, FAQs, and trying to choose the right one is going to create brittle logic. The other thing is it retrieves multiple relevant items at once. So you saw with one query, I got back the playbook and the benefits to that policy, and even promotions and FAQs as well. But imagine trying to do that through a series of REST calls to a content system. That would be challenging. Also, it reacts to content changes very well. So as there are changes to the CMS and those are published, then that can be added to the Pinecone index, and you can still keep using the same type of semantic queries. So this is going to be much more reliable and less likely to break any integrations. It also handles fuzzy, ambiguous, and multi-factor prompts. So when there's different types of questions that may be posed by the customer, you can still respond to those dynamically, regardless of the different variations you may see. For instance, which benefits are most relevant for my company, or what policy clauses apply to this scenario? CMS would not be able to express that semantically. It also enforces content grounding, which you'll see in governance, or what I like to call responsible AI. So you'll see when we do the prompt that it must cite and ground its responses in the CMS content, which is surfaced in the Pinecone index. So this keeps the AI from making things up, essentially. You can unify all your CMS content into that single index. So again, that simplifies the single semantic layer that you have instead of having to make multiple queries. This also keeps your LLM prompt smaller, structured, and safe. So if you didn't have this vector database, your prompt would be littered with the plan copy, the benefits copy, the FAQ copy, and it would become gigantic and struggle to provide accurate results as you run out of tokens. It's also essential for real inbound queries, which we discussed a little bit, like what happens if my payment is late? Does my plan auto renew? And when we're using the same index, both for this workflow and other channel activity like a chatbot, the customer starts to get consistent answers, which is really cool. It also reduces long-term cognitive debt. So when content changes are being made, again, we talked about how this will not break the integration, and that semantic search is going to return the content that we want each time. But if we didn't have it and we had all this extra logic to connect deterministically with the CMS, we would have a lot of technical debt burdens to maintain. So the vector database here is a game changer in conjunction with generative AI. And the next video, we'll take a look at some of the inputs and outputs and how it actually uses this content to produce good messaging for the at-risk customer.